One of the difficult things that I have been faced with when dealing with narcissists in my past is the question, why did I spend so much time with these people? I mean, they ensnared me, they abused me, they took advantage of me, took advantage of my gullibility, my vulnerability, and I'm wondering, why did I hang out with these people so long? I mean, there was one guy that hung around with for years. I mean, he lived in my office for a while. I mean, this is a close friendship. And the whole time I was being taken advantage of, and you wonder, I mean, even other people saw it before I did. And you wonder, how did they do this? Now, they're not necessarily highly intelligent people. So apparently, this is just something that comes to them naturally. It's instinctive. Okay, let's talk about this. We have 6 ways that narcissists keep you ensnared, and keep in mind that there is like an invisible leash. Think of it as a fishing line. You can't see it. You ever tripped over a fishing line that somebody left out in the woods or whatever? You had no idea. You couldn't see it. So they have another good analogy would be like a magnet. They just pull. You can't see the force. It just kind of pulls the whatever it's pulling along. The little metal thing or whatever. You ever lose a screw? Drop a screw, maybe beneath some planks or maybe on the grass, whatever. So you get out your magnet and you can't see the force, but it just pulls it up and it holds it. So narcissists have a magnetic force. They're kind of like fishing lines. You can't see it. It's just there. And you know it because it's holding you, but you don't know it's holding you. You just seems to be natural. Number 1 is this. They are initially helpful. And you think they're your friend. The love bombing, the grooming, and they just can't do enough to help you out. You don't realize it, but you think, hey, this is a pretty good guy. He wants to help me out, so I'm going to help him out. And that's the very first snare, because you are reciprocating his fake kindness. You don't even know you're doing that, but what you are doing is you are showing the narcissist that you're gullible. You're showing the narcissist that you're really naive, that you are pliable, that he can take you and he can manipulate you just simply by being kind and nice to you, and you're going to reciprocate that with no questions asked. You don't even stop and think, maybe this guy is pulling the wool over my eyes. That thought, at least in my case, maybe not yours, but in my case, that never occurred to me. You're expecting now reciprocation back from the narcissist. So he does something helpful for me, and I will do something helpful for him, and he will do something helpful for me. Now, that second helpful for me doesn't usually happen. Typically, what that second helpful for me, well, maybe it's the third or fourth and down the line somewhere, but eventually helpful for the narcissist is where he begins to ensnare you. Help me do this thing, help me on this sales trip or whatever. Help me with a loan, which never gets repaid. Reciprocation is something these people don't know. But initially, they're very helpful, so that ensnares us initially. Number 2 is initially very supportive. I recall when I was a pastor, there were people in my church who were very supportive, and there were some people who were just the opposite. I mean, they wanted to fight about everything. Now, some of those people, I think, were grandiose narcissists. But the covert narcissist, and there were true supporters, I mean, people that were, just loyal, faithful. But the covert narcissist will fake that loyalty. They will fake that empathy. They will pretend that they are on your side and they got your back, but guess what? The whole time they're keeping track. And they are noting every time you flaw, every time you make a mistake, real or imagined. They're keeping track of that. Believe me, they're going to use it later. But they don't show that at the very beginning. Number 3 is typically they have, for lack of a better term, I wanted to call this something, so I called it the bad boss story. Now, I don't know about you, but if you've ever had a job, chances are you've had a supervisor who was a jerk. Some supervisors are jerks on purpose because if they're not, people run all over them. So it's kind of like they have to. But I've known narcissists who would complain incessantly about their former boss. But here's the problem. I knew the guy's boss. And he treated this guy like gold. I mean, for crying out loud, he bought a house for him. I mean, how good can you be? But the narcissist had this bad boss story about how bad his boss was, And I just kind of believed him. I thought his boss was abusive and demanding. And what I was really experiencing, I didn't know it, wish I had, but it was a smear campaign against his boss because the narcissist screwed over his boss. And he was doing this thing, flipping, where he makes the good guy out to be the bad guy and makes the bad guy, which is the narcissist, look like the good guy. So I call that the bad boss story. But one of the ways the narcissist will keep us ensnared is he will have these stories about how people have abused him or hurt him or taken advantage of him. And you just believe him. You don't check him out because, well, this is your buddy. I mean, after all, he helped you out in the past, right? He's a good friend. He's very charismatic, or seems to be, and you guys hit it off. You get along pretty good. Okay, maybe you're in a romance situation, and same thing. And they tell you about how bad they've had it from their previous partner, maybe their previous love interest. And then a few years later, you actually encounter this previous love interest, and you discover you both have something in common. You've both been abused by this individual. Anyhow, that's a version of the bad boss story. Number 4 is what I call the explain campaign. They can explain just about anything. I mean, they can screw people over, hurt people, steal from people, lie to people. And if somebody calls them out on it, oh, hang on, this is just a big misunderstanding. Let me explain it, how it really came down. So at that point, yeah, they can explain away just about anything. Now they'll take the truth, they'll tell the truth, but they'll embellish it. Or they will tell the truth, but not all of it. They'll leave the important parts out. Lie by omission. Number 5 is they exaggerate small things. Now keep in mind what we're talking about here is how they manage to keep us deceived, duped, how they manage to keep us in their web. And we listen to these things and we believe them. We believe the explain campaign. And sometimes they will exaggerate small things, positive things about themselves. There's a guy who has very strong narcissistic tendencies, and I was reading his blog, which incidentally I set up for him, and apparently he lost the password, whatever. But he was writing about a funeral that he attended, and it turns out that I was at the same funeral. Mutual friend. And in his blog post, he was talking about how people would nod to him or smile at him. Like that was a really big deal. I mean, you would have thought the funeral was about this guy, not about the dearly beloved or dearly departed. Well, he was beloved, but beloved departed. That's how these people seem to think. They take the tiniest little thing. Apparently, that's all they got. They take the tiniest little thing, and they blow it way out of proportion to make themselves look grand, make themselves look wonderful. You know, the guy that I said lived in my office for a while, never paid rent. Then didn't offer to pay rent. Apparently, he was entitled. That's the way he thought. But one day, during the years that he lived in my office, one day, he did take out the trash. And he wouldn't let me forget that. I mean, that little thing, he would shine like a gleaming spotlight, a laser-like light on and make sure that outshone everything else. You know, kind of like decorated it like a Christmas tree, so you can't help but to look at it. Took out the trash. What a nice guy. But that's how they keep you ensnared. They will exaggerate small things, and you're so caught up on this person, you don't realize that's not that big of a deal. You took out the trash. I gave you free housing for years. By comparison, I think the free housing worth a little bit more. Number 6 is this, and we kind of touched on this just a moment ago, but they also double down on this thing about the big misunderstanding, because these people, basically narcissists, by their very nature, they got to lie, because they are doing this balancing act. We talked about this, I think, in yesterday's video, but they're doing this balancing act where they are abusive. I mean, they hurt people. They steal from people. They abandon people. And they don't care about the consequences. They just do not. They could leave somebody bankrupt and in debt. Walk away from them, no thought. Don't even consider that they may be to blame or even care. I mean, it doesn't matter to them. These are bad people. But at the same time, they present as being very charismatic. How do they do that? I mean, how do they pull off both of these things at the same time? Well, they're very good at this balancing act, but it doesn't last forever. Eventually, they're going to fall off. But one of the ways they keep that balancing act in balance is they just explain away things, kind of like we talked about before, but it's always a big misunderstanding that you just don't, if you could just see it their way, if you understand their dilemma, their problem, if you understand who the bad guy really was, this is what they're telling you, and guess what? You believe them. Okay, so we got these 6 things, but eventually, what happens to most people when they're engaged in any kind of relationship with a narcissist? Eventually, the truth always defeats the narcissist. There's one thing that I know of, that will take down a narcissist like the sunshine takes down a vampire. That's the truth. So here's the trick. Focus on what is real. Focus on what is true. Think on those things. See those 2 rectangles on the screen? Let's keep talking if you'd like to. Just click on one of those 2 rectangles and the conversation will continue. If not, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you all next time.